welcome everyone here who's on this meditation retreat. And so today I'm here to give a few words, a few stories, a few Dhamma teachings for your practice. I've been in Thailand for more than a month already. Originally coming for the meeting in Ubon, Ratchathani, the Nongpapong meeting. Went to Singapore, Indonesia with Liam and the group, helped translate a little bit, and came back here. And originally I was going to go back yesterday, but when I knew there was this ordination, or a very special ordination, where Anan will be ordaining his first batch of, you could say, candidates to go forth to be fully ordained bhikkhus, monastics, on the 22nd on Saturday. So I extended my trip to stay for that because I think it's a very important occasion in this monastery and maybe even the Buddha Sasana. Although Venerable Ajahn Anan, Anan's been a teacher for many, many years, the feeling now at the monastery is that there's definitely a lot of Westerners here who have come new. When I was here 17 years ago, maybe similar feeling. A few from America, Australia, Israel, and here now there's, I think, ordaining on Saturday, there's, 2 or 3 Americans, South African and Indian, German, Malaysian, so from many countries coming. So this is something quite important. And when I was in Indonesia with Liam, there was one really big event where they invited us for the dana. So we had a huge arms round, more than 1,000 people giving. Took a long time. Then the Dhamma talk Liam gave, and for this whole event there was this group of monks, maybe from another island in Indonesia, who had come to join, but also to pay respects to Liam. And so we did the whole ceremony in the morning, a few hours, and then had the meal, finished the meal, and then this Indonesian monk had waited for Liam to finish eating and came to him with a very, you could say, important question of his. So he said and asked, Lumpur, can you please give me a special meditation object just for me, for my practice, so I can develop? And Liam just sort of didn't even look at the monk, to be honest, and said, your preceptor, your upajjhaya already gave you your kammatthana. And that was all he said. And by that he meant that when the upajjhaya has a duty, that they have to give the new candidates the kammatthanas, the meditation objects of kesa, loma, naka, danta, tacho, forward and reverse, which means head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin. And so my understanding of that short teaching or statement was that what your upajjhaya gave you already was good enough. Go learn that first. And so those going forth have to learn these objects of the body very clearly. The reason why it's done forward and backwards is so that they'll remember it, take it to heart, contemplate it clearly, and in doing so then they'll be able to live with ease in this brahmacharya life, the celibate, the holy life. And so it comes back then to how important it is, this role of a teacher, the upajjhaya, the preceptor. And it's not just in, you could say, in this giving this ceremony, but the going forth ceremony, but also it's monks will go on independence on that preceptor or teacher, and in those years we meant to develop our spiritual faculties enough so that we can be off dependence, or we're how to say, stable, solid, firm enough that we can be even on our own or without reliance on a teacher. But these days, to be honest, it maybe takes more than 5 years, so it may go on for a lot longer, or maybe even the rest of one's life, which is good. I mean, they can keep developing then their spiritual qualities. So I think a monk gave a bit of a teaching on the spiritual faculties a few days earlier, the bala, the spiritual powers. So we know them as faith, effort, mindfulness, sati, which is, samadhi, concentration, and panya, wisdom, the chief of them all. So these, maybe I'll just share a few experiences, or at least some of these candidates that are ordaining have quite interesting stories as well, that how they ended up here, coming from the other side of the world, but ending up here ordaining and getting faith in Venerable Ajahn Anan. I think I probably can share them because they're not here at the moment. There's one that an American novice who he studied traditional medicine, and he was working in Taiwan, he said, for 20 years, doing acupuncture and traditional medicines like that. So it's quite amazing. But the amazing part of his story is that he said he was at that time that he was interested in vipassana meditation, maybe more the Burmese tradition, I'm not sure. But obviously he'd been looking it up online, these talks and teachings. And so he said this one talk kept coming up, and it was called the X-ray of Vipassana. And maybe they try to put flashy titles on it, I'm not sure, but he thought, what's this talk about? So he just ignored it, but it kept coming back up in his, I don't know what you call it, playlist or something. And so he thought to himself that, if I just look at it for 30 seconds, then it'll go away forever. And so he watched it or listened to it, and he said he finished the whole thing, listened to the whole talk. And after that, he said his mind felt very peaceful for the whole day. And if I got the sequence right, that after that, he had the energy to maybe fulfill one of his aspirations he had earlier, maybe many years ago, to give everything up, renounce, and to go all the way to Wat Mapjan. And from here then, I think they quickly found his aspiration and ordained him as an anagarika. And so now he's a novice. That's one of them that will be ordaining on Saturday. It's quite inspiring. There's another American who he said that he'd been doing many of these Goenka retreats, so having quite young, I think less than 30 years old, maybe 25, and so been doing these retreats, but he read the teachings of Ajahn Chah and just knew that this was it, this was what he was looking for, and met another American monk who had ordained here in Wat Mapjan, somewhere, I'm not sure, but then understanding that Venerable Ajahn Anan is his teacher, so he's decided then to come all the way here with the intention to ordain. So he's another one. I think there's a third one. There's one from India. He's one that he's quite inspiring as well, that he went to a Buddhist school ever since he was 4 years old. I think some of the people here might know the school that he went to. So from 4 to 18 or something, he said. But even, I think his families in that area was just one of the few that actually practiced Theravada Buddhism. They said it was mostly Tibet or Vajrayana. So he got inspiration. He was a bit of a teacher as well. Even studied in Thailand for a while, Buddhism. But if I got the story right, it was like he liked the freedom of being able to travel wherever he wanted to on his motorbike. But, but eventually, maybe realizing that wherever you go around the world, you still got to come back right here to solve the problem in the heart. That's my meaning I got out of it. So anyway, so he came here as well, got in faith. But he said that he heard from one teacher that he respected on a retreat about Venerable Ajahn Anan, and then had then the idea to come here, and his family had helped to organize him to come here. And so he'll also be ordaining on Saturday. So this is just a few examples, give you a bit of inspiration, but this is also the teacher giving this spiritual faculty of faith in the people, in those who are looking for a path, looking for something. And one simile that I like, that I think is quite relevant here, that the Buddha gave of these four, say, thoroughbred horses, you could say, or prize horses, or very good horses. He said there's four types. The one that they just see the trainer, just the shadow of their stick, and they'll think, what do I have to do? And they can run. Or the other one that just gets touched lightly by this stick, and then they know what they have to do, and they can run. The third type is the one that has to get hit on the hide, and then they can run. And the fourth is the one that they have to get hit right to the bone. Then they know, oh, what do I have to do? And they can run. And this the Buddha compared to the four thoroughbred or great people. And these are the ones that compared the one that just sees the shadow of the stick, like the one who sees, the one that hears someone has got sick or died, it may be in another town, village, just heard it, and he then is stirred and resolute and looking for the path of Dhamma. He's looking for the way out. Then he, you could say, runs and then finds the right way. The second, the one who has to get touched, that's the one who has to see it for himself or themselves. Someone sick, someone dying. The third is the one that must get hit on the hide. That's the one where they have to experience a loved one, blood relative, it says, the one who gets sick and dies. And then they're stirred, resolute to find the Dhamma, to find the path. And the last one, the one who has to get hit right to the bone, he said that one's like the one who has to experience it themselves. So when they experience it themselves, then they have pain, they have the sickness, suffering, but then they know what to do. And then they seek their way out, they're resolute, they're stirred. And so in my feeling is that, and I think this applies to probably many of you as well, being able to see suffering on some level and then understanding that the overcoming, the liberation from that suffering isn't to be found outside or in having everything perfect, but really inside, in the path and the practice, and that's probably why you're here. So my feeling was that these individuals, maybe that's something similar to what they saw in their lives, and so they, were touched lightly by that stick and ran all the way to Wat Mapchan here to ordain. And so you could say as well, then that's maybe the teacher even calling them here, that's time to get to the practice, to find your way out. So the second factor of effort, this is what like you're doing here. putting effort into the practice, into your meditation, developing the mind. Maybe for some of you, you just heard there was this retreat run by Wat Map Chan Lumpur Anan, and maybe it's not even your first retreat, and then you have the effort in order to give up your time and come and practice. Some of you maybe the whole retreat, some of you maybe for whichever parts you can join. So that's like an effort that comes as well from the kindness of the teacher. He set up all this big system here in front of me, and so we can access everywhere around the world to you all, which I think last time I shared that it's been going on for 9 years, and many sacrifices been made that people have allowed this to happen, and now with the metta, the loving kindness, goodwill of the teacher, then can do this in a more regular basis. But again, it does require a lot of sacrifice from monks, lay people, and for you, your time as well. So here in the monastery, I guess when I was a more junior monk here, then it'd be kind of like the teacher, Lumpur Anan, he'd give advice on how to practice, and if we were sharp, or we would quickly put that into practice. And he said himself, if Ajahn Chah said something, then he would do it straight away. You could say that's someone who's quick to pick up the instructions given by the teacher, the trainer. And so there was once when here, Ajahn Lumpur Anan, he said to put up your umbrella, mosquito nets somewhere in the monastery. Don't just stay in your kuti, your hut, when it's not the rainy season. And so, being just a junior monk, then I had a few monk friends, and we put our umbrella nets up close to the dyeing shed or the robe washing shed. But back then it was quite secluded. You wouldn't see any kutis around or anything like that. And so we put it up there at night, and then just sort of practicing sitting meditation there. And I remember then there was all these bats flying around, and I'm like, what's going on? I hadn't not long coming from Sydney, and I think never seeing a bat before. And this was just a lot of fear came up, but with that, it sort of helped a lot with the meditation, being able to stay with the meditation object, and then straight away the mindfulness changed to a meditation on death. You can die at any time. Remember when the mind getting peaceful, then the fear would go away, and you could just walk meditation outside at night just with the candles, and it'd be quite peaceful. So the teacher would give instructions of how to put forth effort, and so he had a lot of kindness to do that. There was one other senior monk who he shared a story to me, but I think I can share it to you. He said that there was once, maybe a week before Lumpur Anan's birthday, there had been someone else a Westerner who decided that they wanted to, just for a short period of time, offer a practice of Nesachik to Lumpur Anan. And that means that they're going to stay up practicing all night. So no lying down, no back touching the ground for the whole night. That's kind of how they do it in the Ajahn Chah tradition. And so he determined to do this. That only could rest in the day a bit, but at night again having to practice all night through the night. In the morning, obviously doing the morning chanting, arms round, etc. So he did that, and then Lumpur Anan called in this other monk who's quite a bit more senior to me, and told him, "You go and do this Nesachik practice." And that monk told me that he didn't actually give me a time span of how long I'd be doing this for. So he said, I felt like as if he'd sent me to the cave with the tiger there, and I don't know, maybe you might have read the story of Venerable Ajahn Man or Luang Por Man, who sent one of his disciples, whose Samadhi was probably quite good as well, but to go practice right where they knew there was a very fierce tiger, and to practice, put up his umbrella net in front of that cave. And so he said he was struggling with it a bit, but then decided, okay, I'm going to do it, to follow my teacher's instructions and do it. And so later I asked him, so how long did you end up doing it for? He said, for 2 years. 2 years he had practiced, staying up all night. And, he said, I said, whoa, 2 years, that's that's impressive. And then he said, 2 years, it's not that difficult. It's just one day, you do 1 day, and then you do 2 days. You do 2 days, and then you do 3 days, and so on. And maybe in that way, it's a bit of a teaching as well for us when you want to accomplish big things, that it just takes small steps that you do consistently, day by day, step by step, moment by moment, maybe in your meditation as well. Whether, maybe you might hear of these teachers telling you, sit long, many hours, I can sit this many hours at one go. Or there's a story of the monk putting the incense stick, and then I won't get up, I won't move until this incense stick goes out, or the candle goes out. And then the mind starts to fight back. But maybe if we do things just in small steps, small bits that we succeed in every day, then we'll eventually attain or achieve something very big, and it'll be very natural as well. So that's a teaching from him. So Venerable Luang Por Anan, he had very many ways to help us sort of bring up effort. And for you, I'm sure there's these retreats, or maybe in his Dhamma talks, giving you different methods, ways to put in effort, and you can follow it according to your strength and ability. So also the teacher then would give us mindfulness. Mindfulness, obviously we know, very important quality we were trying to develop. This mindfulness, there's another sutta that I quite like, is this one where the Buddha compares it to an ox that loves crops. And so you can say your crops are fully grown or fully ripe or ripe. And he said the caretaker can't be negligent, because if the ox that loves crops comes in, it will just have its fill and just eat everything up. And so what is the caretaker then to do? Buddha says then the caretaker has to grab this ox and then give it a big thrash, give it a big thrashing, and then send it off on its way. And then he said, for the second time, this ox that loves crops might come back again. And so the caretaker will again grab it by the whatever it is, muzzle or something, and then give it another thrashing, and then send it off again. He said, but the third time, they might come back again. And so again, the caretaker grabs it, gives it a big thrashing, and sends it off. And then after that, then this ox will remember, wherever it is, it'll remember the thrashing it got and won't dare to come back to eat those crops. And the crops here are a simile or symbolic of like our sense contact. So in these talks, you're going to hear a lot about liking and disliking, or staying away from liking and disliking. You're going to hear a lot about sense contact. Eye sees forms, ear hears sounds, nose smells, odors. Body has sense impressions or touch, and so that's when we get lost in all that, whether in liking or disliking, or we have different moods or defilements of, say, greed, anger, delusion coming up in regards to those that sense contact, those sense impressions. Then we have to give it a big thrashing. This one, you have to know for yourself. But if we just talk about monks, you might have heard a teaching that Ajahn Chah said of a monk who knows about food, knows about the practice. And so Luang Por Anan, he'd give teachings on this quite regularly to monks. If you know, he might say, if you know you like something, then just take a little bit of that. And the one that you don't like, the food, take a lot of that one. And he said this is going against the mind that wants to maybe eat crops like that. But he may say that if before you get to the food line and you have that liking arise, you're already thinking of what you're going to have, then don't have that one. So in a way, to train the mind to not go towards liking or not go towards disliking. Or for some monks, then they may train themselves in the way that they give themselves a bit of a punishment. If I don't wake up when the first alarm goes off, then I'm just going to eat plain rice. Something like that. And then they try, see how many days the mind wants to sleep in, And you probably, after a little bit of maybe punishment, then it won't be long. You'll wake up maybe even before the alarm. Things like that then is a way that we have to train in the monastery. We're training, in mindfulness in whatever we're doing, but there are times the mind does get quite stubborn or can get attached, and we need to be a bit more, fierce, or even where, there was one Skype or Friday session where Ajahn Anan was teaching about that when one of the lay people asked Venerable Ajahn Chah, how do you teach? He said, you teach samatha or you teach vipassana, tranquility or insight. He said, here we teach torture. And maybe that's the way that Ajahn Chah taught to help monks to bring up patient endurance, their forbearance, and to watch their own mind and to see and to keep it in between liking and disliking. And so there was also once when I remember we were going on a tudong, and this tudong just means wandering sometimes, or actually if you want to be specifically, it means the ascetic, austere practices, but here generally refer to tudong as a wandering or staying in the forest. And so Venerable Ajahn Anan had taken a big group of monks out to a secluded place to practice, where we'd go for more than a week, and we'd put up our umbrella mosquito nets and practice there in the forest. So back then he was taking monks to do this. But at the end of this, at the end of this, you could say retreat, then had the idea that it'd be a good idea if I if I walk back to Wat Map Chan, which was about 100 k's or so, and then I asked Luang Por Anan, I want to walk back, and he said, that's a great idea. And then he got this senior monk who kind of didn't want to walk back. He's probably already ready to get in the car. He said, okay, you go and you lead this tudong. And so he led it, and we were walking back. And I think it was the one day we were meant to get to Geng Wai, which is a branch monastery of Wat Mapchan. And we had gotten completely lost, and it was already 11 p.m. where we should have been at the monastery already. And so one of the senior monk, he had a phone, and he didn't know where to go, but he contacted Luang Por Anan, and he said, Luang Por Anan said, all right, we'll get the car to pick you up and take you to the monastery. Just tell me where you are. But personally, I made the determination that I'm not going to get in the car. I'm definitely going to walk back. And so that was one of my own determinations. No one else had made that. But he sent the car already, and I was like, I'm not getting on that. I'm just going to put up my umbrella mosquito net here, and I guess you could say Luang Por had a skillful way, as in he said to tell that senior monk to share the story with me of when Luang Ta Mahabua himself had made a determination to eat only everything from the bowl. So whatever he got on arms round, that's all he would eat. If he entered the monastery, he wouldn't take anything more. And so after that, there's one day that Luang Pu Man opened up Luang Ta Mahabua's bowl and put in some food there. Or maybe it just got a little or something. And then Luang Ta Mahabua was sitting there and I guess looked up to Luang Pu Man and just accepted that if it was his teacher giving it, then he had to accept it. And so sharing this story with me, I had to, let go of that determination or basically attachment to this, even though it's so hot and inwardly having to practice in that way. So you could say even that's something that is hitting, you could say, the ox, that's indulging in another side, another type. Maybe it's not liking, but it's disliking, aversion, and so having to let that go. So these were maybe skillful ways that the teacher was teaching us to let go and to develop this mindfulness in every situation or experience. So I guess the last type of mindfulness that we develop is maybe, there's pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, and there's also this neutral feeling. So you can say that when we're meditating, we kind of becoming more aware of this neutral feeling, whether of the breath, our meditation object. And for new people, new meditators, this can be quite difficult. You can see that they tend to delight in a lot of things going on in their mind. They like pleasure, they like, or displeasure even, and that something going on is what's been happening all through their lives. And so just to become more aware of this neutral feeling, becoming more interested in it, developing more awareness with it is part of the practice as well. And this is something that we can train in and that you are training in. And so an example of this is that monk that I said that he was practicing or was told to keep that Nesachik staying up all night practice for 2 years. He did finish after 2 years. After the 2 years, he was determined and he could keep doing it, maybe even longer than 2 years. But apparently, Venerable Ajahn Anan told him to come over and said, all right, that's enough of that Nesachik practice you've been doing. Now you can learn Pali. And Pali is, it's not that common maybe for monks to learn that in the forest tradition. And it's something that requires a lot of memory. Maybe different from Samadhi practice, you could say. And so you can see how one could get quite bored of doing that, learning that. There's a lot of books to go through. So this monk, he accepted what the teacher gave him and decided to do it. And so he had to learn all this Pali, something completely new. Maybe for 20 years he'd never really studied in that way. And he's someone who liked peace, seclusion, Samadhi. But he told me that he accepted that he had to do it. And when he decided to do it, then he would make himself interested in it, develop that interest in it. And he said he could do that. And that kept him going. He just took it as like his kammatthana, his meditation object, learning that Pali. And even today he has completed the third level, which is one where they give you a new title, call you a great Maha, a great one. And so it shows you how hard it is to actually do that. Many fail, and he did it all in the first go. But he said that you can bring up interest even in something you find very boring or you don't really want to do. And so this is a skill that we can learn as well. We're developing as well, finding interest in our meditation, in the task or the kammatthana, which means our basis of work. Not all work maybe is interesting at first, but we develop interest in it. And so, yeah, I guess he could do it. And so he as well said that later on that he found even the benefits coming from that was that when he listened to the Dhamma talks that Anan would give later on, that he could internalize those talks even more now because he knew the Pali and knew that, what Lumpur's teaching is very direct and in line with the theory as well. Before he only knew the theory, the practice. He knew about all the practice, been here many years, understood the teachings, but to understand the theory or come back to learn the theory and then put it and combine it together and see, the practice is in line with the theory as well, or even the results are in line with the theory as well. Getting a lot more inspiration and faith and joy even in the practice and giving him more joy to keep going as well. So they're the benefits, you could say, from maybe the teacher pulling you to do something you never do, you never think of doing. And so the fourth spiritual faculty then is Samadhi, and this is something that we're developing. I can see from the past few talks that Paul has given that he's putting a bit of emphasis on developing contemplation. So we're trying to develop this contemplation, contemplating the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, contemplating on our generosity, our good acts, contemplating on our sila, contemplating on death. So all these contemplations, I think in one talk he said that these days people's minds are a lot more maybe active. They need to use more contemplations in order just to get a certain level of peace. And so maybe that's why he's recommending and teaching these methods. And Samadhi is kind of like, in one place, Venerable Ajahn Chah compared it to if you have a child, a kid, and he's crying, so what do you do? Well, how do you make it stop crying? And so he said then you give it something to play with, like a balloon, something that it can engross itself in. And when it gets engrossed, then it stops crying. Why? Because it's engrossed in that object. And so Samadhi practice is a bit like that, giving it the right object or getting the mind to have interest in that object. You can say maybe in the beginning the mind is like a crying child, always wanting attention, pulling you here and there. So we have to give it something skillful to make it calm down, be peaceful. And so Anand's giving many different meditation objects, which I think you're free to use, whichever one is good for you. Sometimes he'll say it's like, do you know which food you like? If you know which food you like, then you eat that food, which he means that the one that gives you fullness or makes you, brings up joy easily, brings up peace easily, then you should use that object. Or there's nothing wrong with using a few objects as well. For some even that have a lot of thinking, then he may suggest something different. For one who was thinking a lot, he suggested then to, okay, now you do Itipiso, just the Buddha Nusati, 108 times, chant it 10 times a day. And then he gave this young monk a counter, so he had to go count every time he was chanting Itipiso. And in a way, that helped him to calm down his mind in the beginning. So he can use different methods like that. Chanting as well can help. And I think the probably most important thing that Luang Por gives us is a lot of encouragement in this Samadhi. He'd say that the ending isn't that difficult, but just the beginning bit is a bit difficult. The beginning bit is in getting the mind to be peaceful, to stay with the object, or just getting that basis where you have some joy and rapture coming up, and that gives you more strength to practice. Or maybe the level of insight that comes up may be just very small, but that can give you great results. But the beginning bit, getting the mind there, may be the difficult bit. And so he's constantly giving us encouragement. Keep practicing. You'll get there. Even Kanika Samadhi, temporary Samadhi, is good. In a way, we're developing this Samadhi so that the mind, which you can say is like that ox that loves crops, it's like you're giving it something else to be interested in. If it's distracted by something else, then it won't go and eat the crops, which is like it's the sensual pleasures and contact and all that of the world. It tends to be absorbed in something, sort of a higher, more refined happiness. And so getting the mind to experience that, or to know that, then we may have our own effort to practice, to maybe then the teacher doesn't need to prod us so much. We'll prod ourselves, and we'll go quickly ourselves. So that encouragement, I think, is very important as well. And I'm sure those who have joined here, then Paul's always giving us encouragement, saying you can do it, you can see the Dhamma. May you see the Dhamma in this life. And all this is helpful, even if we may think, can we really do it? But when the teacher, the Kruba Ajahn says so, then we should give it our best, give it a go, give it a shot. And so maybe lastly then, the teacher giving wisdom. This is something that Luang Por Anand's giving very frequently, could say. Maybe we have the formal talks where he's giving a lot of teachings. I think had a look on one of the YouTube Dhamma, Ajahn Anan Dhamma channels, and I think it's like 1,000. So there's a lot of Dhamma on there for us. And so those formal teachings can be very good. Luang Por himself will share the time that he listened to that Dhamma talk of Venerable Ajahn Chah, and his mind getting peaceful and understanding into conventions and liberation. And that was from a recorded Dhamma talk, right? So, and that was him as a layperson. And so, there's these talks there. You may get a lot of wisdom from that, or even just the mind becoming very peaceful, or using it as part of your practice. That's also good. But there's also maybe the informal talks as well that he's also very, you could say, skilled at as well. sometimes just a few little teachings here and there. Remember once there was myself and another attendant. He's from Australia as well, and someone had offered a sheepskin rug, maybe, or seat, and we started to get into a bit of a debate or argument about whether this was actually the real skin of the sheep or not. And so I was like, it can't be the skin of the sheep, there's no way. And he's like, for sure it is. He grew up on a farm and all this, so he knows. But going back and forth, and the teacher's right there, Luang Por Anan's there, and then go back and forth like this, and he just says, "Ben mei tiang, mei tiang." Mei tiang means it's impermanent. And then both of us sort of just looked at each other, and the debate ended right there, because I guess that's the answer. It's impermanent, that's true. That's all you need to see it as. Whoever's right is, maybe you're right but not correct. You're correct but you're not right, kind of thing. So there'll be definitely a lot of those occasions where he's giving small teachings. I think on one of the books, the author or whoever translated gives a simile of Luang Por trying to throw these balls, small little balls to you, and a little kid, and trying to get you to catch it. And initially you can't catch it, you keep missing them, but maybe later you can catch one or two, kind of thing. So he had many ways like that. There was also once where a monk showed what he would use for contemplation. He used a skull from a cremation, a picture of it, obviously. Showed this to Luang Por Anan, and then showed him, "Oh, this is what I use for contemplation." And he said, "Oh, that's good. If the monks are arguing, then just make sure you show them this picture." And then that's all he said, which means that then to get them come back to reflect on death, basically, and then that's the Dhamma teaching for them. Maybe when we get caught up in all these, our views and opinions and sense of self, then these debates and arguments and things just never stop. But maybe they can stop with the Dhamma, with coming back to impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, not self. One of them who ordained newly here as well, he said that he was a school counselor for 10 years, and he said that, they just keep coming back with problems, and then till the point where he felt like unless they have the Dhamma, they're just never going to solve the problems. And so maybe he got sick of it and decided to ordain. So there's things like that as well. I guess one they said before that I was attending on Luang Por Anan for many years. I think it was from my first Vasa, Pansa, all the way till almost pretty much my 10th, where I was attending on Luang Por Anan, and many times there was many days where it was like even all day, coming from before dawn, setting up everything for alms round, going alms round, having the meal, after the meal, coming back, and there's maybe guests coming and other duties, maybe for monks, monastery projects going on. In the afternoon, there'll be more guests coming, different things going on. Evening, we've got chanting, meditation, and afterwards as well. Many times offering Luang Por a massage and sort of looking after him until he rests at night. And so this would be, some days it was all quite a lot, but there was a lot of, you could say, teachings I got from that as well. But maybe the biggest one, or the biggest thing I got from it, was just seeing, like it says that if you want to know someone, you have to see them over a long period of time, and with sharp eyes, looking at them very clearly. And so I feel like I had that And no matter how much things were going on, it really felt like it was, he was always present in that thing that he was doing. And from the next one to the next one, he could always put down whatever it was from that past moment experience and then fully go to the next one, which I think is a skill that everyone kind of wants to have. But this comes back to the teaching that Luang Por will give of knowing in time the mind states or the aramana, the mental objects, the sense objects, as they arise. And that's like in Thai, Lu Tao Tan Arom. That one is where the greed, hate, anger, delusion just doesn't come up. It just arises and ceases. The simile that the Buddha gave is one like if you make a mark on a rock, and then the mark obviously stays there for a very long time. But if you make a mark on the water, then it'll, on the sand, then it'll stay for a short time until it disappears. And that's compared to like anger coming up and staying for a long time. And the second is anger coming up and then coming up just for a short time. But the third type is the stick that's been making a mark in the water, which as it arises, it ceases instantly. And that's the type of state that is, in that sutta it says it's like this monk can be criticized, harsh words towards them, and they can talk to them in a pleasant mood, in a normal mood, without having that, carrying that whatever mind state, that feeling there in the mind. It's kind of like that. And that's what I kind of felt of all the time of, it was like that. Don't think there was once when it felt like it wasn't. And things that were done seemed as if they were done according to, to Dhamma, to causes and conditions, even though on the outside maybe, there's different expressions there. But it seemed as if it was kind of using this self to give benefit, as in sometimes, maybe, Paul has to be the one that's the big teacher, the big Ajahn. Other times, when there's a much more, senior monk, he can be very respectful, etc., and that's very inspiring as well. Other times he can be quite fierce if needed, but other times just quite light-hearted. Remember once he was inside this Uposatha hall, maybe giving a bit of a fierce talk, but then can go right to the back there on the seat at the back, and then just have a very light-hearted, casual talk to bring up the minds of the monks there. And so he could use that for benefit. And so that was very inspiring. So maybe I've shared a few stories then with you, and maybe a few little teachings that I got from my time here. Maybe it can be of inspiration to you in your practice.